But I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments, and I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism.
Yeah, homie, you got it wrong. Homie ain't getting on just 'cause homie got a song.
In this video, we'll be doing a little bit of reading and following along. Yes, I said reading and following along. Don't your ass dare click off. But a few excerpts from one of Martin's speeches that kind of transitioned him from non-violent into we need a check. But first, I'd like to welcome you to Doing It for GP. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment if you like the content, and if you so choose, scan the QR code to donate to the channel. And with that, let's take this walk. And like I mentioned, Martin Luther King has been remembered as one of the most integrational, unifying figures in American history. And that's how they like him to be remembered. Every year, you got the I Have a Dream speech, which is plastered all over TV because the message that has to be gotten across every year is that the black man that we've chosen to be the greatest black man in history, which Martin Luther King is a great black man in history, superb orator, and also a writer. But I digress. The I Have a Dream version of Martin that says turn the other cheek when you've been offended, and love thy neighbor, love thy brother, we're all brothers and sisters, we can all just get along, is the non-militant figure to keep black people frankly docile and taking action to change the plight. This speech, The Other America, mainly some of the excerpts I'm about to read, can be applied to 2024. And this shit was 1967, I believe. But without further ado, let's get into it. And we start off like this. In my Martin voice. Nah, not in my Martin voice. And I'd like to use as a subject from which to speak this afternoon, the other America. And I use this subject because there are literally two Americas. One America is beautiful for our situation. And in a sense, this America is overflowing with the miracle of prosperity and the honey of opportunity. The honey of opportunity. This man was that guy. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignity for their spirit. In this America, millions of people experience every day the opportunity of having life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in all of their dimensions. And in this America, millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. And this is where it gets dark. But tragically and unfortunately, there is another America. This other America has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the buoyancy, oh boy, of hope into the fatigue of despair. In this America, millions of work-starved men walk the streets daily and search for jobs that do not exist. In this America, millions of people find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. In this America, people are poor by the millions, and they find themselves perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. This Martin, and I don't mean to call him but goddamn. And this is where my dog gets inclusive. Many people of various backgrounds live in this other America. Some are Mexican American, some are Puerto Ricans, some are Indians, and some happen to be from other groups. Millions of them are Appalachian whites. I assume that to be the poor whites. Probably the largest group in this other America in proportion to its size and the population, is the American Negro. The American Negro finds himself living in a triple ghetto. A ghetto of race, a ghetto of poverty. Is Martin going in or what? But we must see that the struggle today is much more difficult. It's much more difficult today because we are struggling now for genuine equality. And it's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee a livable income and a good, solid job. It's much easier to guarantee the right to vote than it is to guarantee the right to live in sanitary, decent housing conditions. It is much easier to integrate a public park than it is to make genuine quality integrated education a reality. How different is that shit from today? And so as a result of all of this, we see many problems existing today that are growing more difficult. It's something that is often overlooked, but Negroes generally live in worse slums today than 20 or 25 years ago. Facts. In the North, schools are more segregated today than they were in 1954 when the Supreme Court's decision on desegregation was rendered. Economically, the Negro is worse off today than he was 15 or 20 years ago. And so, the unemployment rate among whites at one time was about the same as the unemployment rate among Negroes. But today, the unemployment rate among Negroes is twice that of whites. And the average income of the Negro is today 50% less than the whites. I don't know the numbers, but that shit might not be far off from today as well. And then Martin gets to the meat, racism. Racism is still alive in American society and much more widespread than we realize. And we must see racism for what it is. It is a myth of the superior and the inferior race. It is the false and tragic notion that one particular group, one particular race is responsible for all of the progress, all of the insights, and the total flow of history. And the theory that another group or another race is totally depraved, innately impure, and innately inferior. In the final analysis, racism is evil because its ultimate logic is genocide. He cooking. To use a philosophical analogy here, racism is not based on some empirical generalization. It is based rather on an ontological affirmation. It is not the assertion that certain people are behind culturally or otherwise because of environmental conditions. It is the affirmation that the very being of a people is inferior. And this is the great tragedy of it. I say that however unpleasant it is, we must honestly see and admit that racism is still deeply rooted all over America. It's still deeply rooted in the North, and it's still deeply rooted in the South. God damn, the truth spoke then, the truth speaks now. This leads me to say something about another discussion that we hit a great deal, and that is the so-called white backlash. Uh-oh. I would like to honestly say to you that the white backlash is merely a new name for an old phenomenon. It's your Martin. It's your Martin. What it is necessary to see is that there has never been a single solid, monistic, determined commitment on the part of the vast majority of white Americans on the whole question of civil rights and on the whole question of racial equality. This is something that truth impels all men of goodwill to admit. There's so many ways you can say that. And he chose that way. Like, that boy is... Yo, Martin was a beast, bro. Like a beast. What I'm trying to get across is that our nation has constantly taken a positive step forward on the question of racial justice and racial equality. But over and over again, at the same time, it made certain backward steps. And this has been persistent of the so-called white backlash. In 1863, the Negro was freed from bondage of physical slavery. But at the same time, the nation refused to give him land to make that freedom meaningful. And at the same time period, America was giving millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that America was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic flour that would make it possible to grow and develop, and refused to give that economic flower to its black peasants, so to speak. Shit is like I'm eating candies. And then he gets into another relative subject of 2024. White politicians in the suburbs talk eloquently against open housing and in the same breath contend that they are not racist. And all of this and all of these things tell us that America has been backlashing on the whole question of basic constitutional and God-given rights for Negroes and other disadvantaged groups for more than 300 years. So these conditions, persistence of widespread poverty, of slums, and of tragic conditions in schools and other areas of life, all of these things have brought about a great deal of despair and a great deal of desperation, a great deal of disappointment and even bitterness in the Negro communities. Today, all of our cities confront huge problems. Today, all of our cities are potentially powder kegs as a result of the continued existence of these conditions. Many in moments of anger, many in moments of deep bitterness, and this is where he addresses specifically rioting, which nobody wants to see anybody's city get destroyed, and neither did Martin. But this is how he addressed it. A riot is the language of the unheard. And what is that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that the large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. So in a real sense, our nation's summer riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. God damn it, Martin! And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. I gotta stop there. His speech is like 44 minutes. But like that, what I just read was like the crux of what he was trying to say. And of course, he's able to stretch out and able to articulate his ideas into an hour lecture. What a great man. Please go check out that speech, The Other America, as well as other speeches that Martin started to let people know, hey, I want us to all get along, but my people up right now. And this is just a prequel to my Black History Facts with the Mac February edition that'll be going on every day in February. A new Black History fact, a new person, a new event to keep you new generations abreast on. Till next time.
You gotta say shit, you already know how to take over. G-Mac, you lit, I'ma get a game.